let's learn about watercolor techniques. So let's talk about materials. So I'm going to use a piece of watercolor paper. You can use your visual journal. I have a few brushes, but just one brush that's a medium size will be perfect. You're also going to need a plastic lid or something to mix your paints on. You can just use the lid of your watercolor set if it has one, or you can just use something from your recycling bin like I'm using. Your watercolor set might look different from mine, and that's totally fine. I also have some paper towel. The first technique we're going to learn is a wash. So I'm going to start by dipping my brush into my water and making a little puddle of water on my plastic painting palette. Then I'm going to dip my brush into my paint and wake it up. And then I'm going to dip my brush into my water. So now I have a puddle of paint. And now what I'm doing is I'm just testing to see how dark my wash will be. So I like how dark this one is. So I'm going to do a stripe of paint and then dip back into my paint puddle. And each time I'm recharging my brush with paint from my paint palette. So this is called a wash. I'm trying to make it all sort of even blue. I want to have it all the same. So I'm doing my best to do that. And that's my regular wash. So now I'm wiping off my brush with my paper towel, and I'm just gonna suction up any extra paint that's pooling on my paper. So that's the cool thing about watercolors. You can always soak up any extra paint that you don't want. Okay, variegated wash. So that's when we're doing two colors instead of just one color for our wash. So I'm going to do the same process, make a little puddle on my plastic palette, and then I'm going to choose a different color to dip into. So maybe I will dip into purple, or maybe that's indigo. So I'll dip into my indigo paint, and I'll keep adding more paint to my puddle of water until I'm happy with how dark it looks. So the more paint that I add, the darker my wash will be. The more water that I add, the lighter it will be. So I will test it out on my little paper here, and I want it a little darker, so I'll just add a little bit more. And then I will just check one more time to see what it looks like. There, that's great. So I'm going to dip into that indigo color. I'm going to do a stripe of that. Okay. And then I'll dip into my other blue wash, and I'll do a stripe of blue and another stripe of blue. So I'm trying to make it transfer from the dark indigo to the blue paint. It's kind of hard to see the transition, but that's what a variegated wash is, when we use two different colors. And then I dried off my brush, and I'm going to slurp up that extra paint there. All right. Now this one that we're going to do is a graded wash. So that's when we're going to just use water instead of a second color. So I'm mixing a wash out of this nice red color here. So I made a puddle of water, and I added paint to my puddle. And I'm going to do a stripe of paint, and then instead of dipping back into the paint, I'm going to dip into the water this time. And I'll keep dipping into the water. And see how the paint sort of like goes down into the water area. So I want it to go from dark to light. All right, this is fun. This is where I'm going to use my paper towel to lift up some of the paint. So I'm just going to do a wash of whatever color I want. And then I'm going to grab my paper towel, and I'm going to smush it up. Oh, sorry, I'll wash my brush first. I'm going to smush it up, and I'm going to dab at my paints, and it lifts up, and it looks kind of like clouds. It's pretty cool, hey? Okay, so now we're going to do wet on wet. So I'm going to make a wash of a different color. So we're getting tons of practice with making washes. I'm going to make a purple wash. And I'm going to paint it on my paper. Oh, sorry. No, I'm going to paint my red wash on my paper first. And then I'm going to add the purple paint right on top of it when it's still wet. So this is my favorite technique. It's so fun. So when we add the purple paint, it just mixes in with the red paint. And then I can dip directly into my paints. I don't have to make a wash. I can actually dip directly into my paints and add more purple. And it creates those cool purple blossoms of paint. So here's a review of the techniques that we learned. So the wash is just all one color. The variegated wash is 2 colors. The graded wash is 1 color and then water only. In the lifting wet, we use paper towel to soak up areas of the paint. And with wet on wet, we add wet paint on top of wet paint. So much fun. All right, thanks for watching.